Now, Putin's television phone-in came as his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov discussed the crisis in Ukraine with Ukrainian, American and European officials in Geneva. Here on set with me is France 24's international affairs editor Douglas Herbert. Douglas, the two sides in Geneva, they really couldn't be further apart, could they?
Yeah, a tale of two absolutely diametrically opposed agendas at this summer. On the one hand, basically having the U.S. and Ukraine pointing the finger squarely at Russia and Vladimir Putin for fomenting this unrest and fomenting it by backing these militias which Russia denies it has anything to do with on the ground in Ukraine, creating unrest, stirring up unrest, creating a chaotic situation, an unstable situation, as we've seen time and again in recent days in the East with the seizures and occupation of public buildings, police stations, in some cases violent situations. On the other hand, Russia, in the other corner, saying absolutely niet. That version is hogwash. It has nothing to do with the reality. In fact, what we have is a brutally efficient or inefficient government, as the case may be, in Kiev, a government that is full of fascists and neo-Nazis that are bent on denying or making life as hard and as tough as possible for the Russian speakers who are dominant in the eastern part of the country. And in fact, it is the government in Kiev that is responsible for pushing the country to the brink of civil war. So you really have it's a dialogue of the death, they say, and they are not seeing any common ground whatsoever. It's interesting because coming into, on the eve of this meeting, you had Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, basically saying that his goals, his agenda, as he sees it for the summit, would be de-escalation of the conflict, disarmament of illegal formations, constitutional reform, and elections. Those are the issues he'd like to address. When he's talking about disarmament, he is really talking about the Ukrainian army and the limited actions. And the irony here is that the Ukrainian army has had setback after setback. They have been repelled everywhere they have gone, surrounded by these pro-Russian militants once again that the U.S. and Ukraine insist are being fomented, if not actively, by Russian forces on the ground, at least passively, because they are doing Russia's bidding and they know what Russia wants. And they've openly appealed, in some cases, for Vladimir Putin to send troops to protect them. So it's a very tense situation. It's a situation in which there's a lot of potential for a lot of shouting across that table, because one of the things we do know that Kiev was thinking of asking was, for the upper house of Russian parliament to cancel that law that was passed about a month and a half back, allowing the use, in the potential of a grave situation, of Russian troops on Ukrainian territory. Now, we haven't had that happen yet in eastern Ukraine, although Vladimir Putin did admit earlier today, after failing to do so until now, that yes, in fact, indeed, there were Russian troops in Crimea. So it opens up an interesting sort of new line of questioning about who is in eastern Ukraine. We also expect Ukraine to ask, and you might say, well, isn't that a done deal? That's already past history, for Russian troops to withdraw from Crimea, which is now, according to Russia, part of Russia. And we also are probably going to have Kiev making some very firm requests for those 40,000 troops that the U.S. and NATO says are massed on Ukraine's eastern border there on the Russian side to pull back. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not what the Ukrainian foreign minister said going into these talks, that he is hoping to use, that it will be possible to use as a chance to use diplomatic means to resolve this crisis, whether or not, in fact, when you get these sides sitting at the table, somehow they're going to find a way to make that, to bring that to fruition.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Douglas.